Whitney Webb recently shared her thoughts on the election cycle, tweeting, "One thing I've learned this election cycle is that a lot of people who have claimed to be anarchists or anti-state were really just waiting for the right king to come along. Manufactured complacency and blindly trusting the plan, whether QAnon or BlueAnon, will enable tyranny. If you don't want tyranny, shake off the complacency and pay attention to policy action over rhetoric now that the election is over," she warned. The people who have been deluded into thinking that the deep state is not a bipartisan evil, but a purely partisan one, are in for a big surprise once again. Whitney retweeted a post expressing disappointment in political promises, highlighting concerns about leaders not fulfilling their commitments. Reflecting on a past statement, she brought up a tweet from September 28, 2021. "If you think you're backing a radical agenda that's also backed by Wall Street, predatory multinationals, and the billionaire class, I am sorry to inform you that you're a pawn, not a revolutionary." She added, "I tweeted this over 3 years ago, but it's still relevant as ever." Whitney expressed her consistent stance. "I've had the same opinions about politics and politicians my entire career, but every 4 years the team that wins says I must be playing for the other side. Newsflash, I think both parties are organized crime and masterfully manipulate the American public's honest desire for change. I'm not changing my long-standing views, which are based on extensive research, because it hurts your feelings." In a follow-up, she discussed concerns about appointments in the new administration. "I know Salatine, and that would be a welcome change, but I remain skeptical about certain individuals who are choosing staff. There are connections to Wall Street and investments in ESG, carbon markets, and green bonds, as well as efforts to implement the UN's Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs). I remain skeptical, especially since it's been said that RFK will have no role at HHS, only access to vaccine data. Yes, but the question then becomes, how can we be sure that the data he is receiving is accurate when we know, for instance, that Pfizer rigged its COVID trial data and that other vaccines manufacturers have done the same? Feet need to be held to the fire now that the lesser of two evils won." Whitney Webb highlighted concerns about partnerships between technology companies and government agencies, retweeting Eric Voorhees. Today, Anthropic AI and Palantir announced partnership to provide U.S. surveillance and military agencies with advanced artificial intelligence capabilities. This AI firm that puts safety at the frontier is now arming the world's most militant empire. In response to a request for clear arguments and evidence, Whitney provided detailed reasons for her skepticism. "I will happily give you clear arguments for why I am skeptical. Reports indicate that the transition team lead says RFK will not actually have a role at HHS and will only have access to vaccine data, contrary to what was promoted publicly. Last time Trump was in office, he extensively deregulated GMO crops and plants. J.D. Vance, Vivek, and Musk are deeply invested in biotech, including biotech health products like mRNA vaccines, which Trump supported last time via Op Warp Speed and has yet to issue a public apology for his COVID-era policies. Speaking of those policies, Trump let Larry Fink design COVID-era fiscal policy, which saw the U.S. print more dollars than at any point in history and which began even before a pandemic was declared, and it resulted in a massive transfer from Main Street to Wall Street. Trump campaigned in 2016 on regulating Wall Street and bringing back Glass-Steagall, but he further deregulated Wall Street instead, helping to create the 2023 banking crisis that began with SVB. Trump campaigned as loving WikiLeaks, but then let Mike Pompeo plot to imprison and murder Assange, and refused to pardon Assange but pardoned financial criminal Michael Milken instead. The guy responsible for going after Assange, Pompeo, is still in Trump's good graces, and one of his top aides is now in charge of picking staff for Trump's new state dept. Trump didn't start any new wars, but he didn't need to because 5 were already happening, some of which he greatly expanded, and he dropped more bombs than Obama. He had a bunch of neocons in his cabinet and tried to coup Venezuela, which would have exacerbated the current migrant crisis, and killed an Iranian general on a diplomatic mission in an OBV attempt to goad Iran into war. This cycle, war with Iran, has been signaled by Vance, Trump, and Pompeo. I have plenty of reason to be skeptical because of the above track record. Everything I said comes with receipts. When Brett Weinstein challenged her, stating, "You're not even close," Whitney responded, "Well, Brett, unlike you, I didn't wait until Trump was out of office to criticize the government's nefarious and terrible COVID policies. Unlike you, I didn't ignore the fact that Trump's VP pick, major donor Musk, and major ally Vivek are all deeply invested in GMO biotech and genetically modified vaccines, and that Trump's first term saw a massive regulation of GMOs under the guise of strengthening biotech innovation. I also didn't give Trump a pass for still to this day refusing to reject his mRNA, military-designed COVID-19 injections. Unlike you, I think it is a troubling sign that the Trump campaign has said that RFK Jr., who I have my own gripes with, will have no leadership role at HHS at all, but merely access to vaccine data, but no real authority to do anything with that data, despite the public campaign that the opposite would happen. Unlike you, I think it is troubling that people tied to CIA contractor Palantir, which distributed the dramatically undertested COVID vaccines to minorities first and hoarded Americans' health data under COVID, are very involved in the incoming Trump administration. They also basically run a CDC office that will declare the next pandemic before it happens. Palantir also profiles Americans to be put on domestic terror watch lists based on their online activity and powers the war on domestic terror no matter what party is in the White House. J.D. Vance's career-long benefactor and Palantir co-founder Peter Thiel, many of his allies like Musk, Lonsdale, and Sachs, backed Trump heavily and are involved. His transition team funded the facial recognition firm that brags about sending January 6th protesters to prison. Thiel is not a libertarian, as he claims, and openly says he hates free market competition. So, I'm afraid you're blinded by your strong emotional feelings about this election cycle, just like you were blinded by fear during early COVID when you showed everyone how you wear your mask. I'd appreciate a response, but I suspect you'll block me just like your brother, who spent many years working for Thiel. Whitney pointed to an article focusing on the transition team lead who is choosing the incoming administration's staff, noting connections to efforts aimed at implementing the UN's Sustainable Development Goals and ties to carbon market initiatives. She added, despite Republican rhetoric and past policy on the Paris Agreement, the incoming administration is being heavily influenced by figures tied to carbon markets and efforts to implement dubious climate finance schemes. On November 8th, she expressed, amazing how a fact-based explanation of why you are skeptical of a politician leads people to demand that you then must solve all of the problems of the world, or your reasons for skepticism are somehow invalid. Too many of you would drown, waiting for the right person to bring you a houseboat even though you can swim and your neighbor has a life raft. I'm a journalist and, unlike a politician, I don't churn out empty promises just to make you feel better. Change will come from the bottom up and not the top down. We are the leaders we have been waiting for, and the desperation for a political savior is tiresome. Politicians want your trust because the government wants you to be complacent and dependent, and if you trust the figurehead-in-chief, you are more likely to be those things. Skepticism and critical thought are important. There's a reason they bred it out of the education system. As of today, discussions continue around the formation of the new administration and the potential implications of their policy choices. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Whitney Webb's perspectives. Do you agree with her assessments? How do you think we can best hold our leaders accountable? Stay informed, stay engaged, and until next time, take care.